Imagine this. You're sitting across from someone who's clearly unraveling, tired eyes, clenched fists, a hollow smile masking the chaos underneath. They pause in the middle of a sentence and whisper, "But I should be grateful, right?" And just like that, the truth of their pain gets buried under a glittering lie. They're drowning, but they've convinced themselves they should be floating, because someone somewhere told them that positivity fixes everything. You've likely done it too. Suppressed your rage with a smile. Gutted your sadness with affirmations. Buried your fear under a shallow mantra like, "Everything happens for a reason." You smiled in the mirror while something inside you quietly died. This is the sickness no one talks about, the cult of compulsory optimism. In a world that prizes happiness as the highest virtue, positivity has become less a source of strength and more a weapon of denial. It's a shiny mask glued to your face, even when your soul is begging to scream. But what if this kind of positivity isn't saving us? What if it's slowly killing something essential? What if happiness, the way it's sold today, is hollow at its core? Modern culture doesn't tolerate emotional discomfort. From self-help books to social media influencers, we're bombarded with messages urging us to stay positive, look on the bright side, and manifest good vibes only. Grief becomes an inconvenience. Anger is labeled as toxic. Depression is something you can fix with a gratitude journal and 10 jumping jacks. And if those don't work, the problem must be you, not the culture that programmed you to fear your own darkness. Ask yourself, what happens when you feel sad in a world that says sadness is failure? What becomes of anger in a culture obsessed with being agreeable? What is lost when we turn every emotional struggle into a personal development project? The message is clear. If you're not happy, you're broken. If you're struggling, you're not trying hard enough. And if you dare to speak of your pain, you're bringing down the vibe. But here's the paradox. Real positivity, the kind that sustains and transforms, is born not from denial but from confrontation. Yet we're told the opposite. We're taught to bypass pain, not integrate it. To slap a smile over trauma. To move on when our psyche is begging us to go deeper. This is not kindness. This is emotional gaslighting dressed as enlightenment. And the irony? The more we chase happiness through forced positivity, the more anxious, numb, and disconnected we become. Studies show it. Burnout rates confirm it. Deep down, you feel it. You've probably experienced the dissonance yourself. That strange, hollow guilt that arises when you're surrounded by blessings but still feel broken. You try to cheer up, but your nervous system doesn't comply. You scroll past a quote telling you to just choose joy and feel even more alone. And you begin to wonder, what's wrong with me? Why can't I feel good like everyone else seems to? But maybe the better question is, what's wrong with a society that sees authentic suffering as a threat to its illusions? Could it be that the relentless pressure to be positive is not healing us but deforming us? That in our quest to feel better, we've lost the ability to feel deeply at all? In a strange and bitter twist, positivity has become a silencer, a sedative, a beautifully marketed form of denial, and most of us are addicted. So what's really hiding beneath the surface of our good vibes? What ancient instincts and psychological truths are we suppressing? And what are the long-term consequences of this refusal to look darkness in the eye? The answers don't come easy. They require a descent, a journey inward, a confrontation with the parts of ourselves we were told to ignore. But without that descent, without that shadow work, any light we project is just an illusion. If you've ever felt the emptiness behind the smile, if you've ever wondered why relentless positivity feels more like pressure than peace, then you already know. There's a sickness in the light. And to understand it, to finally break free, we must go deeper. Into the history, into the psychology, into the soul. Why are we so afraid to feel? This isn't just a personal question. It's a cultural wound, deep and ancient, carved into the modern psyche. The world you live in was not built to hold your grief. It was built to erase it. Positivity, in its current form, is not an emotion, it's a performance. And like all performances, it requires a script. Smile. Be grateful. Think positive. Move on. That's the story we've been told. But who wrote this story and why? To understand this, you must look past the glitter of self-help mantras and dive into the architecture of the mind, into the psychology of repression and the philosophy of suffering. Carl Jung once warned, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. He believed that every human carries a shadow, a repository for all the emotions, impulses, and truths we're told to disown. Anger, sadness, envy, shame. Not because they are unnatural, but because they don't conform to the image we're expected to project. So what happens when you refuse to acknowledge your shadow? It doesn't disappear. It grows. It festers. It waits. Jung argued that what we reject within ourselves doesn't vanish, it comes back in distorted forms. Anxiety, addiction, emotional numbness, chronic people-pleasing. We don't heal by avoiding pain. We heal by facing it. Yet the culture says otherwise. The modern world, driven by capitalism, consumerism, and a shallow definition of happiness, encourages the exact opposite. It tells you to chase good feelings and suppress the rest. The result? A civilization terrified of its own emotional depth. Enter the cult of cheerfulness. Aldous Huxley foresaw this in Brave New World, a society obsessed with comfort, entertainment, and shallow pleasure. In his dystopia, pain had been eliminated, but so had meaning. Citizens numbed themselves with a drug called soma, designed to keep them happy, docile, and unquestioning. Sound familiar? Today, positivity is our soma. We use it to bypass the real. We chant affirmations to silence our despair. We post filtered smiles while silently unraveling inside. And if someone dares to bring up death, depression, or trauma, they're labeled negative or draining. But here's the truth. Cheerfulness without depth is just spiritual anesthesia. Friedrich Nietzsche, often misunderstood as a pessimist, saw suffering as essential to growth. To live is to suffer, he wrote. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. For Nietzsche, life was not about the elimination of pain but the transformation of it. He admired those who embraced hardship with courage, who turned wounds into wisdom. But such a philosophy requires a culture that honors emotional complexity, not one that pathologizes it. In contrast, modern positivity often shames struggle. It suggests that if you're unhappy, it's because you're thinking wrong. That if you're hurting, you're failing at life. This is not wisdom. This is psychological violence in pastel colors. It also reflects a deeper philosophical trend, hedonism as identity. In a world where the self is increasingly defined by pleasure, anything that disrupts comfort becomes a threat to the self. Suffering isn't seen as sacred or transformative, it's seen as an error. But not all philosophies bow to this comfort cult. Arthur Schopenhauer, perhaps the bleakest of them all, believed that suffering is the foundation of human existence. While extreme, his insights have value. Schopenhauer believed our desires keep us trapped in a cycle of longing and disappointment. Happiness, he said, is merely the temporary cessation of suffering, not a permanent state. His solution wasn't to plaster over pain with artificial joy, but to confront the nature of desire itself. He suggested that peace lies not in chasing happiness, but in understanding the illusions we build around it. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and existential psychologist, took a different path but arrived at a similar truth. In his book Man's Search for Meaning, he observed that even in the most horrific circumstances, those who survived were often those who found meaning in their suffering, not those who pretended it wasn't there. Frankl wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But that change doesn't come from ignoring pain. It comes from looking directly into it and finding something sacred within the ruins." Now ask yourself, what happens when you live in a society that doesn't allow this kind of transformation? You end up with people who are smiling on the outside but emotionally comatose on the inside. People who mistake numbness for peace. People who become addicted to motivational content because they're terrified of sitting still with their own thoughts. The problem isn't that we want to be happy. The problem is that we've made happiness a duty, a moral imperative, a branding strategy. In doing so, we've banished the darker half of our humanity into exile, and with it, the possibility of true healing. The tragedy is not that people are sad. The tragedy is that they feel ashamed for being sad. That they no longer know how to cry without apologizing. That they're told their breakdowns are failures instead of invitations to rebirth. And so we return to the paradox. The more we insist on being positive, the more we deny the very emotions that make us whole. The more we chase joy, the more elusive it becomes. The more we force happiness, the less we understand it. You begin to see now, don't you? Positivity, when distorted, becomes a prison made of light. But what happens when people start to believe that prison is paradise? What happens when we confuse denial for strength, silence for resilience, and illusion for truth? That's what we'll explore next. Because once this mask of positivity becomes permanent, the consequences run deeper than most dare imagine.